Hello, and welcome to the Autism in Black podcast. I am your host, Maria Davis-Pierre, licensed mental health counselor and the CEO and founder of Autism in Black, Inc. Today's guest is Dr. Briana Barner. She is a media studies and podcast scholar, currently working on a book about the cultural production of Black podcasts. She is a late diagnosed AuDHD baddie who lives with her family in the DMV area. She is raising 3 children who are all autistic. Enjoy today's episode with me and Dr. Briana. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. I am so excited about today's conversation. Welcome, Dr. Briana.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here. I'm such a fan. Your podcast is the first thing that I recommend whenever people ask me for resources on autism and Black people. So to be here I'm having like a fangirl moment.
No, I am so excited as I was telling you about, and I really want to jump right into it. So, can you start us off by sharing a bit about who you are professionally and personally? Maybe what led you to the intersection of media studies, motherhood, and neurodivergence? Give us a little taste.
Yeah, so professionally, I'm Dr. Briana Barner. I am a professor. I study media studies, all things Black popular culture. I'm currently writing my first book about the cultural production of Black podcasts. So I am a podcast lover. So this is also all coming together so beautifully. Personally, I am a mother of 3 awesome children. All 3 of my children are on the spectrum. And that led to me having my own evaluation and diagnosis of autism. Initially, I was diagnosed with ADHD, and then the autism diagnosis came later. I have always been just really interested in media, popular culture. I thought that I was going to work for Essence. That was my dream. And I was getting my degree at the time when print was kind of like dying out and digital was becoming more popular. And so I was like, not sure that trying to work for a magazine makes the most sense. And so I pivoted, but I always knew that I loved media. So I was a double major in undergrad, went to HBCU. And so I studied Black women in media. So it was like the perfect marriage between the two. And so from there, I decided that I wanted to research Black popular culture and media. And so that's how I stumbled upon realizing I wanted to be a professor. And now I teach classes about Black popular culture. I have a class called the Black Podcast Class, and we also have a podcast. So my students, our class sessions are live podcast sessions, and my students get to interview podcast hosts, and then they produce the episodes themselves. So it's a fantastic class. It's one of my favorite classes. And yeah, I love my job. I love the flexibility that it gives me, and the flexibility is really important, especially having 3 neurodivergent children and being neurodivergent myself. It makes a huge difference. So yeah, that's me in a personal and professional nutshell.
I love that. I have so many questions. There's so much alignment here because I know for me, I'm also ADHD. I received my ADHD diagnosis in like 2003, 4, and then my autism diagnosis in 2021. But for you,
Mhm.
you actually got your ADHD diagnosis and your autism diagnosis like a year apart.
Yes.
Can you walk us through that journey and how it unfolded for you? Because I know so many parents who get diagnosed after their children, especially in the Black community. So, can you
Mhm.
tell us about how that was for you?
Yeah, so I initially was diagnosed with anxiety years prior. So in grad school, I got that diagnosis. But it didn't seem to feel like enough, but I didn't question it. It was just like, okay, I'm just gonna struggle and it is what it is. But once I started seeing traits in her, I'm like, huh, okay, something, is different about her. And so I got her diagnosis. But as I started working with my own therapist, she's like, okay, we're seeing some interesting things in you too. And so one day I finally just said to her, like, hey, I think that I might have ADHD. And she's like, oh, perfect. Like, I clocked it 5 minutes after we started. So I'm glad that you finally said it. I've been waiting on you to kind of put the pieces together. Let's do a screening and, let's see what's going on. And so we did the screening and she's like, oh yeah, you have ADHD. And she's like, it's interesting because on paper, based on your answers to these questions, like you wouldn't be considered ADHD, but she thankfully had a very culturally competent lens. And so she's like, most of these questions, I am not surprised that you answered the way that you did because you're a Black woman. And so a lot of these things don't align with you, but because I've known you and I've been in session with you, I know that like there are other things going on that these questions don't reflect. So I'm very grateful for her for taking the time to kind of like layer it and like look beyond just what's on paper. And then once my second child got their diagnosis of autism, that's when I started kind of being like, maybe there's something else going on. But I initially was thinking about autism as like Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. And so I'm like, I don't see myself or any of my children in that world. But I started watching Young Sheldon, which is, Sheldon as a younger child. And that's when I was like, this is this is interesting. Like this is giving a different perspective. And so I got my second child diagnosed, and then the doctor is like, hey, I think that you should just consider getting the third child looked at because if you already have two, chances are that the third one is probably going to also be on the spectrum. And I'm like, I don't think so, but okay, I'll get him diagnosed. And he was on the spectrum. And I started again seeing more of myself in him as well and kind of seeing myself in all three of them. And so I brought it to my therapist and I was like, okay, girl, so let's kind of let's chat. I think I might also have autism. And she's like, I don't think so. Like I don't see it. I see more ADHD, but this is not my specialty. So I'm going to refer you to another person who that's their specialty because I don't want to tell you yes or no and be incorrect. So I went to go see a psychologist who specializes in autism, and the same thing happened with the therapist. Within 5 minutes, she's like, yeah, I'm seeing traits of autism. And I'm like, oh, okay. Funny enough, she did not agree with the ADHD diagnosis. So, like, they both were like, I don't see both. I see one or the other. But
Mm-hmm.
I told both of them, I'm like, I've been doing my own research. It's what I do for a living. And so I'm like, I see the intersections of both in myself.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't think that either one of them on their own it, like reflects the total picture of who I am. But
Yeah.
together, I'm seeing that those traits are reflected in who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw this TikTok video that said that like once you get medicated for ADHD, a lot of
Ooh,
times that like
yeah.
increases the autism symptoms. And I was like, ooh, okay, like we're cooking now
Yeah.
because
With the with hot
I
with
it
the
yes. And so I also think that that's why the psychologist didn't see the ADHD traits
mm-hmm.
because I'm medicated for it. And so, like, they're pretty managed right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's like, well, yeah, you didn't mention anything about focus. Like, you seem to be able to, like, stay on track during the conversation. Like, I'm not seeing any of the ADHD traits. And so when I was reflecting on it with my therapist, I told her, I was like, yeah, I think it's because I'm managing those traits so well. And she was like, that makes a lot more sense as to why she didn't see it. And it also makes sense as to why I didn't initially see the autism traits. But now she's like, oh, okay, girl, I see it now. Like, now I'm asking her, like, so when we start our sessions, like, can we turn the lights off?
Mm-hmm.
Or, she has fidgets on her table and like I never engaged with them before. Now, kick my shoes off. I get comfortable. Like even now, I'm sitting crisscross applesauce. That's what I do. Like everywhere. Didn't think too much about it. And she's like, "Do you always sit like that? Like wherever you go?" And I was like, "Yeah, I didn't think about it." And she was like, okay. And so now I grab the fidgets, we have the lights off. Like, so now we're able to really dig into the things that we didn't notice before. And so it's still something that we're unpacking because I got the autism diagnosis in August of this year. So we're still unpacking it in addition to unpacking having three children who all present very differently. Like they all reflect that autism is indeed a spectrum. So I have had a very interesting 2 years.
It is, as you were talking, one, I was automatically thinking, because I know for me, um, my ADHD trumps my autism characteristics if I'm not
Mhm.
medicated. If I'm not medicated. You're just gonna see you're gonna see so much ADHD, but then when I
Yeah.
am medicated, it's like, oh, there it is. There it is. We see you now. So I can heavily relate to that, because for me, my ADHD is much more difficult for me to navigate than my autism diagnosis, because my ADHD is
Mm,
so impactful in my day to day and what it stops me from doing and what it lets me do. But medication is a wonder, so I'm appreciative to that. And yeah, like you said, there are three autistic individuals in our home, but four neurodivergent. And all of us are so completely different, and we trigger
mhm.
each other up in here. So it's quite eventful. So I can understand what you're alluding to there. I know for me, having gotten the autism diagnosis in 2021 and it being 2025, there's still ebbs and flows of me unpacking what that diagnosis means for me. So, what has shifted for you emotionally or practically, now that you are diagnosed, and it's frankly, late diagnosed as an adult?
Yeah, so like I said, it's been an interesting 2 years because I've been like really sitting with like all of the things that I've struggled with all of my life. And I think that I like me and my oldest son are like in this way in that like he's a perfectionist just like I am. Like he's already been identified as gifted. And so getting him support has actually been harder. Whereas my younger two, it hasn't been, well, it has been harder to get my daughter for different reasons, but because we both present as like highly intelligent
Hmm.
and highly capable, it's been really, really difficult to get us support for people to believe that either one of us are on the spectrum.
Hmm.
And so, I mean, obviously, I have a PhD, and so that trips people up all the time because they're like, "How are like I don't understand. How did you get a PhD and not have these diagnoses?" But also, I think that because people don't always understand that it's not a learning disability, I think that they also are like, I don't understand how. And I'm like, first of all, if you've been in academia long enough, you will peep that most of most academics are neurodivergent. And it's like the perfect field for us because we're able to hyper focus on things
Hmm.
and like really hone in and lock in on things that are special to us or that mean things to us. So it's not seen as weird for me to be able to like go down rabbit holes about podcasts or like go down rabbit holes about, a TV show or character or whatever. So it 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 was something that was very easily undetectable in me. I went down the path of I was labeled as gifted, and so I was in advanced classes, all throughout school, and so I went undetected. Like no one ever guessed that that was something that I struggled with. Meanwhile, reflecting on it in therapy, I'm like, oh, when I say I'm struggling or like, oh, I've been doing work for hours, I literally mean I'm struggling, I'm doing work for hours. And then I started asking my friends, like, hey, how long, many hours per day, like, did you spend on homework? And they're like, oh, like maybe two. And I'm like, oh, okay. So I would spend like 4 or 5 hours every day doing homework. And after asking like multiple people that same question, because we all were in the same gifted program, I'm like, okay, I'm realizing that like I I hid a lot of those things or I masked those things because when I would hear all of us kind of doing our complaining about school and stuff like that, we were not talking about the same things, and I did not know that. And then even in grad school, I struggled so much in grad school, and I just assumed that it was because like it's grad school, everyone talks about how hard grad school is going to be. Like a PhD is not supposed to be easy, it's a PhD. I'm also first generation. So I assumed that a lot of the struggles that I had were because I was first generation, not putting two and two together that there's also some other things going on too as to why I'm struggling so much in terms of like balancing all of these readings, but also like learning the social context of grad school and being with people who are not first generation or who, I don't know, just maybe had different relationships or perspectives to things than I did because of the autism, and not realizing that I have really, really bad executive dysfunction, and not realizing that that is also why it took me so long to get through readings, to get through homework, to write my dissertation, like all of these different things. And so, um, sitting with that and like really reflecting on how that, like what that means for me now in the way that I work. So again, I'm a professor, and so everyone talks about how hard it is to be a professor. So for me, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. I'm struggling because being a professor is hard. I'm struggling because I'm a first gen professor. I don't know, many other professors who look like me, who are from, where I'm from. I'm from Chicago. So it's like all of these things I just was kind of like, oh, well, it's because of this. Oh, it's because of that. And so now I can really sit with like, no, it's the neurodivergence. Like that is what is causing all of these struggles. And so I started thinking a lot about like how I like my relationship to productivity,
Mhm.
and how I was beating myself up for, why is it taking you so long? Like, why can't I keep up with a planner? Or why can't I figure out whatever systems I have? Not realizing that most of the productivity tips that I received were based on how neurotypical people work and not myself. And so I am working with coaches now, as opposed to just feeling like I have to do it all on my own and just kind of like raw dog it through life. Like I don't have to do that. So I'm working with coaches now. I'm asking for extensions. I'm letting people know that like it's going to take me much longer than what I thought to do things, and it's okay. Or asking clarifying questions like, "Hey, I didn't understand that. Like you said that in a way that was not clear to me. I need to make sure that I'm understanding what you're saying," as opposed to just sitting silently and hoping that someone else will ask the question that I wish that somebody would ask because I don't understand. So it's impacted so much of my life. And it's also made me more compassionate towards my students, because I realize that so many of my students are also suffering through these same things, and it's not something that we're trained on as college educators. Like if my students have IEPs, I don't know that. That information doesn't come to me, and they have to register with the disability office. And so it's up to them to
Mhm.
register for the disability office. And it's not like no one follows up behind to see if we're actually implementing the accommodations that they have.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we don't talk about that in college, and it's not something that we talk about in our pedagogy training either.
Mhm.
So it's made me think about so much stuff, and like how I approach my classrooms. But also, I'm proud of myself because I was actually implementing like universal learning strategies without even realizing that I was. And so that made me feel better, but it's also made me think really deeply about the kind of classroom environment that I want to have, because again, it's not something that is talked about. And dealing with the IEP stuff with my younger children, I'm like, this is really opening my eyes up to the ways that so many of our students are failed, but also how, as professors, we have so many blind spots just because it's not talked about. It's just like you're supposed to figure it out. And if you're in college, you're on your own, you figure it out.
Mhm. Mhm. And I relate so much to that. I am currently in IRB phase of my PhD program, and this is,
Whoop, whoop.
yes, I'm almost right. This is actually my second PhD program. My first one is related to the first program I was in was related to my master's in therapy and
Okay.
coursework. I was able to get done because it was more of, this is the date you need to get it done and this is what it needs to be. So I had guidelines. When I got to dissertation phase, I was like, oh, this is too much freedom. I don't know what I'm doing over here, right? And it was
Yep,
just like, I'm
yep.
not gonna, it's a non-preferred task. I'm not doing it. And then,
Mhm.
my interest changed. So I actually quit that program. And then circling back when I started this program years later, I knew I needed a system. I had much more information about myself, my
Yeah.
neurodivergence, my executive functioning, and things like that. So now that I'm in dissertation phase, it's still been a struggle because I am raw dogging this entire program because I don't have accommodations because my school wanted a particular assessment and I wasn't going to go pay for that. So I am without
Mm,
accommodations. And it's still been a struggle, but having the knowledge of, okay, this is what I need, and being in an education program, my actual major is special education. Um, my professors are much more understanding of disability. So when I'm having the conversation with them, they're like, do what you need to do. So
mm,
because they have an understanding of disability, this has also changed the perspective of how I'm navigating this actual dissertation phase and this degree. So I think it's so important, like you said, when your professors understand, when the school, and it makes the total difference for a lot of students, because when it comes to the Black community, late diagnosis, underdiagnosis is not uncommon. So we are
right.
truthfully in these programs raw dogging it because we don't know. We just think
Yep,
we're not meeting goals. We're looking like, oh, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I meet this demand? Why can't I
yep.
do this? So it is so important, like you said, to really that professors, that the school has the capacity to show up for their students
Mhm.
in different ways and not think that it's laziness or you just don't want to get the work done and things of that nature because neurodivergence is happening.
Yeah, I mean, you have hit it right on the head. Like I think that, and like I said, I've been implementing these strategies without realizing it. But in going through the IP process and like really sitting down with my daughter's providers and like really thinking through what are neurodiverse affirming strategies that can work for her, it's made me definitely think about like what I can do to implement that into my classroom. But it is harder to do it at the college level because like our class sizes vary. Our classes change each semester. Like I'm not with them for a full year. I'm with them for one semester. So it is harder, but it's not impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So that is definitely something that I'm looking into. It is becoming a special interest of mine, thinking about ways to have an inclusive classroom and even just like ways to think about media and like how to make sure that it's accessible to
Mm-hmm.
my students, or even like I am a really big believer in creative projects. When and so like my a lot of my colleagues will sometimes talk about how they have like issues with their students submitting assignments or just like participating, and I don't tend to have those issues in my smaller classes. Larger classes, yes, but in my smaller classes I don't tend to have those issues because I am I am allowing them to pursue interests that they actually want to do. So, like, I do a ton of creative projects, a ton of creative assignments. I allow them to submit assignments in whatever format they want. So, if they want to record themselves answering the questions, or if they want to just do, video, audio only, that's okay too. And so, I don't have those same issues. And like, once you allow students to do an assignment in the way that works the best for them, the results are just absolutely amazing. And it's more fun for me as a professor to grade stuff that they're excited about because they really put effort into it. And so for a lot of them, they'll tell me, like, this doesn't even feel like I'm doing an assignment. Like, I would do this even if you weren't giving me a grade for it. And it's I don't do anything special. I'm just like, as long as it's related to something that we're covering in class, the sky's the limit. You do whatever you want. And so I am proud that I'm able to do that, but I do know that, there's a lot more work to be done. And I do hope that I can contribute, even in some small way, to really thinking about what neurodiverse affirming strategies can look like for not only undergrad students, but for graduate students too. Because, I mean, we really do not even talk about it at the graduate level and how we can accommodate our grad students.
Mm-mm, not at all. It's not even a forethought. It's like you've gotten to this level, so you better keep making it work over here, right? So
Yep.
it's
Yep. Yep.
it's difficult because there's not a lot of talk about managing it, and I think there's also, shame and stigma, and for a lot of us, like when you're going into undergrad and you're coming out of high school and you may have had an IEP, that kind of transition is easier in the sense of, oh, I have documentation to now go and get accommodations and have this,
Right.
there was transition planning, hopefully, in middle school and high school that was preparing them
Yeah.
for, going and advocating for themselves. But for those of us who never got a diagnosis, who are, twice exceptional gifted. I was a gifted student. And we're going into these realms, those things we don't even know about. I didn't even know disability office existed at college level until having my
Mm-hmm.
own children. And by then I had
Mm-hmm.
already had a master's and I was in the dissertation phase of the first PhD program, and I didn't even know that existed because it's not
Mm-hmm.
talked about. So you're right. The light needs to be shed on these things because, especially for the Black community and especially for Black women, because we know that we are the most educated out there and also the most invisible, intersectionally invisible when it comes to getting a diagnosis and being seen. So I am just so thankful that you're, being vulnerable and having this conversation because I know I needed it, because, it's been a struggle out here in these academia streets. My professor, like, here she come with another Black focused autism paper. Yes, yes, every single paper, and I'm not even kidding y'all, has been about my special interest, which is the Black side of autism. So I know they're like, here she come again. Yeah.
I love it though. It's so important because I mean, part of the reason why it was such a struggle to get my daughter diagnosed is because she does not present the
Hmm.
way that
Hmm.
that other people
Of
expect
course.
an autistic child to present. And so it took almost a year to get her diagnosis, and luckily the evaluator was culturally competent just like mine was, and so she was able to say, okay, on this paper based on these scores, she does not, I didn't, like, she's not
Hmm.
passing the autistic test, but it is very obvious to me that she is on the spectrum. And so she asked different questions.
Hmm.
She, gave her different things. She did all kinds of different things that was not reflected in on the paper and the questions that were being asked. Her evaluation took 4 hours.
Hmm.
And that, like when I had my boys tested or evaluated, it took an hour, hour and a half. Like it was not as long as hers at all. And it was like, oh, this makes complete sense. Like, yes, of course they're autistic. My daughter, completely different. Like they were 100% ready to give her the anxiety diagnosis, which she
Hmm.
also has.
Hmm.
But, and again, this is very similar to how mine was. The anxiety diagnosis, of course, makes complete sense. But autistic, no. Like, I don't understand. She's there's nothing about her that is showing us that she has autism. And even after I got the diagnosis for her, when it was time to have her IEP meetings, the school refused to give her the code of autism,
Hmm.
even with the diagnosis. And so I had to fight for that for months. And it took, thankfully, another Black woman, another Black school psychologist to come in and say, why are we debating if this girl has autism?
Hmm.
Her report is right here. Every, like, her mom did everything she was supposed to do. She went to the gold standard of, in the area that we live in. Why are we debating if she has autism? Like, I don't understand. And so it wasn't until she said it and she basically schooled them on how it shows up differently in girls and especially in Black girls,
Yes.
then they finally were like, okay, we'll add her the autism code to her IEP.
And that is one, I'm not surprised as a clinician, one with doing with my own children and advocating, it is common. One, and y'all know I'm about to get my on my soapbox about uh DSM and these evaluations. They are ingrained with racism, they are
Mm-hmm.
ingrained with biases. We do not
Mm-hmm.
present like a white male. And that is what the DSM is based on. That is what
Yep.
our evaluations are based on. Even
Mm-hmm.
when you are textbook DSM, autism, they're still difficult. My daughter, my oldest, presents textbook for
Mm,
going through at that time of what the autism diagnosis was, and it still took me to sit to boycott in the pediatric neurologist's office for a week for him to give the diagnosis. Like, it is such a
wow.
struggle in getting our community the diagnosis because of bias, stigma, and practitioners not understanding that Black people present completely different from
Hmm.
most any kind of DSM diagnosis because of how society, how we have to navigate society. So you have to go
Yep.
past your what you learned clinically and ask deeper questions because we just present differently. And with
Yep.
girls, it's always anxiety, depression, eating disorder before they even think of autism. And they're
Hmm.
so quick to give the anxiety, not understanding the anxiety is a manifestation of your actual autism. So,
Yep.
there I and y'all know I could go on for days about this, but I am happy that they gave her the right code, and that hopefully her IEP is unique to her as an individual. And I'm gonna get off my soapbox now. I'm coming back on another episode about it, y'all, and I'm gonna go in. But yeah, it's horrible out there in these clinician streets for that.
No, that I mean, I've learned a lot just listening to episodes of your podcast, and I I just would have never guessed that it would have been as difficult, because I mean that's one of the first things they say, like if you suspect, that your child has autism, that you should go get them evaluated. And I'm like, I did all of the things that I was told to do, and hit roadblock after roadblock after roadblock. Like it was just so frustrating, and it was such an isolating experience because other people around me, family and friends who love them to death, but they meant well, but they were like, I don't see it. I don't think that she has it. Like, why are you pursuing this? Like, why do you want that label for her? I don't think that that's what it is. Like, blah, blah, blah. Or it's a phase. She'll grow out of it. Let's pray about it, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I know that you all mean well, but that is not actually helping. It's actually causing me to not want to talk about it. And it was just it was a really, really difficult time before I was able to get her official diagnosis, because we had been kicked out of school. It was like all of
All
this
of these things.
all of this stuff that we were going through. And I never stopped talking about it though. And so again, like when people ask me about autism, like your podcast is one of the ones I recommend, because a lot of people, after hearing me share about the experiences that we're going through, for a lot of them, this is the first time that they've heard
Mm-hmm.
someone talk about
Mm-hmm.
autism, and especially a Black woman and
Exactly.
a Black girl in our experiences. And so, whenever I share about what we're going through, I've gotten so many messages in my inbox. I've gotten people texting me, calling me, just asking me like, yo, I relate to what you're talking about, or like I'm seeing, these different things. Like, what do I do now? What do I do next? And I'm so grateful that like I've been able to be that voice for other people, because I felt like I didn't have that. Like I didn't know where to start. I didn't know where to go. And a lot of the things that I was seeing, it was very helpful, but most of them were white people. They were not Black people, and they were certainly not Black women or girls. And then I discovered you, I discovered Supernova Mama, and it was just such like a breath of fresh air, because I'm like, okay, I'm seeing people who look like me, who talk like me, who sound like homegirls, who sound like people, that I grew up with, who are saying things that are relatable to me and that sound like more of my experience and less of what I was seeing. And so even now, my daughter is dealing with school avoidance, and I am in the school avoidance streets and trying to learn more about school avoidance.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been attending webinars, and I'm in different groups. 9 times out of 10, I'm the only Black person in the room,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm listening to the suggestions that the facilitators are giving, and I'm like, this all sounds great and dandy.
It's
None of this is actually applying to my daughter
not gonna
at
work over
all.
here. It's not gonna work over here.
It's not gonna work out. And you all have a bias in that you are under the assumption that these teachers and that the administrators are even willing to see our children as human and willing to kind of sit down and look at what is actually happening. Why aren't these students going to school? Why is school such a horrible place for them? Like, you're under the assumption that the teachers and the administrators are actually wanting to answer those questions. And luckily, I'm able to work with a school that like they've been absolutely incredible, but that's not always the case. And like we don't refer to black students as being school avoidant. It's just that they're not going to school, they're skipping, they're being defiant, they're all of these different things.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the language is not the same that we use for black students as we do for other students.
It's, the how black students are treated, and I have to explain this so many times to a lot of white organizations. I was like, you guys don't understand that not only are we battling ableism but racism, and they're so deeply entwined that we can't tell one from the other. When I
Yeah.
walk into somewhere, they have to deal with, I am a black woman, before they even get to my disability. Our children are
Right.
dealing with the same
Right.
thing, and on top of that, they're being adultified, they're being held to
Yep.
higher standards that they're
Yep.
never going to meet because it's
Yep.
not developmentally appropriate. So we're fighting all of this just to then get to, let's talk about my disability. And when people do not understand that fight, that's
Yep.
where it goes wrong for the children. That's where it goes wrong for a lot of educators, because they're not understanding their own biases coming into play when
Hmm.
working with our children. And it's one of the things that led me to get this PhD, because I was like, oh, y'all wait, because once I'm done, the overhaul that's about to happen is going to be
Yes.
justice over here. Um,
Yes.
but I just want to thank you for being so vulnerable with us and sharing and having this conversation. I feel so warm and fuzzy when I feel like I'm talking to my girl. I'm like, let me tell
Oh,
you,
thank you.
I,
Thank you so much.
I really do.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate you. And tell the people how they can connect with you, how they can find you, if they're
Yes.
interested.
Yes. So I run a very small Instagram page. It is very small, still growing. Raising Awesome Black Children, and Awesome, AUSOME. And I just started that as like this is a page I wanted to see when I was searching for answers, because I had been like sharing so many tips like on my personal Facebook page. And I'm like, I should probably have somewhere where I can like put everything together, because I get so many different questions about a variety of different things. And so um yeah, that's where I would direct people, is to the Instagram page. There's a Facebook page too under the same title. So yeah, and I don't really want to give out my personal Facebook page, so I'll leave it at
Well,
Raising Awesome Black Children.
and we'll have all of that information in our show notes. Dr.
Yes.
Briana, thank you. Thank you so much for this conversation. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for
thank you
having me.
all for course. And thank you all for listening to another episode of the Autism in Black podcast. And we're going to catch you on the next episode.